Yeah, so I think most people are hurt and angry when a layoff happens. It's a natural part of the process. You've lost something, right? And so in my view, it's both. What I do is I help people to not wallow in the anger for too long, right? But I'm never going to tell someone you're doing it wrong if you're angry. You're doing it wrong if you're disappointed or unhappy. Makes total sense, right? Mm-hmm. And I help people see the opportunity on the other side. And sometimes just sharing examples of, I know many people who have experienced a layoff or a job loss in their life. And many of those same people have said to me that it's the best thing that has ever happened to them, because it caused them to reevaluate what they were doing and what they wanted to do. And then they came out better on the other side. But when you're in it, that's hard to see. Mm-hmm. So we help people see, okay, your situation that you're in right at this moment is lousy. What are we going to do in the morning? Mm-hmm. What can we do tomorrow to see if you can make it through just another day, and to not wallow in being very unhappy and letting that thought spiral happen.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Job Seeker's Journey podcast. And before we get going with this episode, I would just want to say to anyone who is listening right now, I am proud of you. It doesn't matter what stage of this journey you are on, whether you are on the very beginning stages, you're working at a place and you are trying to decide what you're going to do, whether you want to stay or leave your current job to find a new opportunity, or whether you are now in transition and are trying to determine where you want to go next. In any case, I am proud of you for taking that step. Today's guest is Ellen Lyman. Ellen works for a large company here in the United States. She's an IT director by day, but she also owns a coaching business where she specifically tries to help people evaluate what their values are and how either their current company aligns with those values or how they are missing the mark on those values, or when you're in transition, how your future company aligns with those values that you are looking for in your next opportunity. So that's what today's episode is about, is evaluating your values. I'm so grateful for Ellen coming on here and giving us her insight, and I cannot wait for you to hear this conversation. So without further ado, here is my conversation with Ellen Lyman. All right, I'm here with Ellen Lyman, and I was sharing with you right before we got started that I have been included in a circle, a network of people that has been amazing for this podcast and for me personally, of just getting to meet one person has led me to be able to meet some other people. The last couple episodes was with Amy Herr, and she introduced me to you, which is by far, and I know I've said this a lot on this podcast, but it's by far the coolest part of doing the podcast is all the different people that I've gotten to meet over the course of doing these episodes. And you're no different. And I was really excited when she pointed me your way, because you have a really amazing day job and with a cool company, and that everyone's would have known. And then you do this on the side, and that's such a cool thing that you're here to help people. Yeah. So before we go any farther and kind of dive into these topics, I wanted to give you a chance to introduce yourself and what you do for people and all that, and then we'll get going.
Well, thank you so much. I can't start with my introduction without saying that if you haven't listened to your last podcast with Amy Herr, you basically just described what it's about, and it's about networking, which I think is such a wonderful thing that, Amy talked to you about networking. I listened to that podcast. There are a lot of really great golden nuggets in there. And Amy introduced me to you, which is networking, right? And it's such a wonderful thing. So to introduce myself, I'm Ellen Lyman. I work for a large global company as my day job as an IT director. I have a team that makes technology work at my company right now. And by night and weekend, I do some career coaching for folks. And I do that because I just love seeing someone progress in their career, doing something that they want to be doing, that they love to do. In my day job, I coach my staff all the time. But if someone were to come to me at work and say, hey, Ellen, I know I'm an IT developer right now. I really want to be a ballerina. My company's not paying me to help them with that. But I actually have this burning desire to help them with that. Right. So that's why I do the coaching at night, is because I just love to help drive people to what they love to do. And I have a skill that allows me to do that.
Yeah. Has that always been something that you've just innately had, and you just found a way to be able to make that kind of a side business? Or is this something you kind of stumbled into as you got into higher levels in your day job, and you kind of was like, oh, I actually do really enjoy this?
Yeah, I think it's always a little bit of both, and things develop over time. I'm one of those rare people that did my day job as the thing I studied in college. I studied management of information systems, and that's what I've been doing my whole career. But doing that, I had the opportunity to lead people and coach people. It's most of the time, it's not about the technology. It's about the people that you're working with to make it work. And the feedback that I've gotten consistently is that people come to me for coaching, they come to me for guidance, and that I'm good at listening and that I offer good advice. And so at one point in my career, I myself personally burned out. And I sought my own coach. This is the typical origin story of people trying to do things that they got help from somebody else. I got my own coach. She helped me see what it was I was good at, what I really wanted to do. And I started to steer my career towards that direction. And part of that was coaching others and helping others.
Yeah. I love that. And it's interesting. I think I've told this story on this podcast before, but as we get into talking about values and figuring out your values, it's interesting how, as you go throughout your career, and I've been in multiple industries as a project manager. The last 5 were actually in IT. So you're kind of speaking my language a little bit there. Yeah. And I was actually told by an old boss a few years ago that they didn't appreciate a value of mine, which was that I was very empathetic with my team. I was very empathetic with the clients that I dealt with, which made me really effective as a project manager and made me, really good at communicating, between developers and clients, and be able to translate developer speak into speak that everybody else can understand. Yeah. And I used to do that with engineers too. It's the same thing. But he didn't appreciate basically just my overall demeanor, I guess. Okay. But what I find interesting in that is that, and it wasn't because I didn't have successful projects with him, because I did, and he would give me more projects. It's just personality wise, we weren't the same. And some of that was where we lived and different approaches to just general life between the Midwest and big cities and different things. But what I found interesting is that those values is what actually drove me to want to do this podcast and want to really try to help everyone else that are going through a situation that I'm going through as well. and it's the same value. So I love the fact that we're kind of talking about this, and because it rings home with me and really kind of makes me remember some of my journey as well in my career and what got me to even wanting to do this. So I'm always fascinated with coaching. I haven't had a coach up to this point, but I'm really fascinated with what coaches do. And so one of the questions that I have for you is, when someone comes to you and they're looking for a coach and they're looking to make a change, what is some of the biggest things that they kind of ask you to help them with? I can imagine a few things, but I'm curious what you get approached with the most.
So right now in the current climate, I'm getting more people coming to me because they are unemployed and they need help finding work quickly. But for all of my clients, even the ones that are employed, the number one problem that we work together to solve is the statement of, I don't know what I want to do next. So there are people that are employed who are burning out. They've worked for a short period of time, or even 10, 15 years, and they're starting to get bored. They may be underappreciated, and they're just stuck on where to go next in their career. And that's true for people who are employed, and it's true for people who are laid off. Now, the urgency and priority of finding work is different for those two groups of folks. But most of the time, there's this underlying theme of, I'm not sure what my skills are suited to, or I'm not sure what I want to do next in my career. And I need help figuring that out. And that's what I work with them on.
And do you typically have people that are coming to you at a stage of, I'm pretty fed up with where I am for whatever reason? Maybe that means they don't feel appreciated, like you said. They don't feel like they have an avenue of growth or whatever that is. Or are they kind of in a state of, I think that I want to do something else, or I just don't know if my company is willing to help me get there, or any of those? Are there any of those people that maybe you've talked into even really staying where they are? Or is it mostly they're kind of at that point of like, no, I'm going to go. I just need your help to get there?
Yeah, it's both. And one thing that you said is that you wonder if I've talked people into staying. And as a coach, I would never use that language. What I would do is I would say, I have helped people discover that they want to stay, which is very different.
Yes,
right?
a very well put way of saying it. Yes, don't listen to what I just threw out there. That's what I meant, but I said it wrong. So thank you for correcting me. Yes.
Yeah. Most of the people that come to me for help are at the stage of being fed up. I wish people would come to me for help before they got to that point. Right. But most folks, if they're starting to feel a little dissatisfied with where they're at and they're not sure if they're in the right place, if life is working for them, they're not going to be motivated to go on a website and search for a career coach. Right. So most folks are either they're fed up or they have some urgent need to find work. And I help those folks to see, and we figure out together what they want to do next. I think there was a second part to your question, and I'm not remembering.
Oh no, it's okay. It's okay. I like that you corrected my bad word choice there.
It's all right. You're not a coach. It's okay.
Right. And that's more what I was getting at. It was interesting. I had a conversation a few episodes ago with a person who is, he's a regional manager of a McAllister's Deli franchise. And He was telling me a lot of times he has a lot of people that'll come to him, and initially they'll come to him and say, I think I'm going to start looking for something else. And when he starts to have that conversation with them, a lot of times he'll realize that they don't even necessarily know what all their company offers. That some of the things that they're looking for, the company actually does offer that. They just never took the time to know, or just never learned that it was something that the company did. And a lot of times people will end up staying because it wasn't that they were unhappy with their actual job. They just thought that they didn't have anywhere to go, or that they didn't have help with education, or whatever the situation was. And so that's what was really popping in my head at that point of, I think that you try to make I think what was coming into my head was more about making sure that they're not just making an emotional decision based on one avenue or one situation that happened. And they're like, well, that's it, I'm out, and because that doesn't always end very well. Grass isn't always greener type situations. And that's, I think, what was going through my head. But
one of the questions that I'll ask folks when they come to me, if there's someone comes to me, they're unhappy, they're fed up, and they're still employed. One of the first things I'll ask, even just in a consultation, is where are we at in this decision? Like, do you have to quit tomorrow because you are so done? Or, can we work for 6 months and get you to where you need to be? And some people say, I need to be gone. I need to go tomorrow. And that's a different approach that we take.
That makes sense. That makes sense. So when we first met and we had a really nice conversation before, a week or so ago, I know we talked about that you've also spent time on the other side as a hiring manager and been across the table from people who were applying to work at the company you've been at. And I was wondering, how has that helped in your coaching abilities? Because you've seen good, bad, ugly of people coming in with different approaches and all of that. So how has that helped you when you've been coaching your clients?
Yeah, it's a lovely question. It helps with the tactical pieces of helping someone find a new job. Because I have seen very many resumes, some really excellent and some not so much. So I can pick out what's good about a resume and what's not. When it comes to how it helped me as a coach, that's really the interviewing stage. So I've interviewed a lot of people, and I see what nervousness can do to someone when they're interviewing. I've seen what communication skills can do and how they can help you or how they can hurt you. And I've seen what desperation can do to you in an interview. If you're desperate for a job, there was a candidate once that really came across as incredibly desperate, and it didn't interview well. And so as I coach folks, I will do mock interviews, and I'll try and see some of those things. I try to make people nervous sometimes in a mock interview to see what happens when they're nervous. And so seeing that on the hiring manager side has really helped me to see what comes across in a client.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that you said that, because I think there are a lot of things that do come across really poorly. And, one of the reasons why I always am harping on taking care of yourself mentally, taking care of yourself physically, getting yourself in the right headspace, being able to reframe your situation and looking at things differently. It just helps when you are interviewing, because there used to always be a phrase that get thrown around of people with a job are more attractive than people who don't have one when they're going through interviews. And I used to hate that. And I used to just be like, well, that's ridiculous. Like, you've got all these people who are looking for a job and you're telling me that the people with it. But as I got to really sitting with that, the thing that kind of came to my mind, and feel free to disagree with this, But the thing that came to my mind is there really isn't the desperation when you have somebody who has a job that's interviewing for another one, because they have something to fall back on and they want to work there, but it's not a desperate situation. It's not something that they need anything. They just am interested. And so you're more relaxed, you're more who you are, and then people can see you and get a better evaluation. And so it started to make sense to me. That phrase, even though I still hate that phrase, I understand what they're getting at. And hopefully we can start to turn people when they are in a transition period to be able to get into a mind space that allows them to be calm like that and present themselves the best way they can, so that at the end of the day, they walk away and say, well, I gave everything I am. I said everything I wanted to say. I presented myself how I wanted to present myself, and we can let the cards fall where they may,
Yeah. I'm sure it's a factor. So I don't disagree with you. And I think, if you're coming across as desperate in an interview, it's going to present differently than if you're not. There's 100 other factors too.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. So values. I love this topic. I love just the idea of people really evaluating who they are, what's important to them, and those kind of things. And you've mentioned a couple times that is a huge part of your coaching process, of really helping people get to that point. And I know that it's probably the same process, but I want to try to look at this in a couple of different ways. I want to look at it as, if you are somebody who is currently working and is going through this evaluation process, and we can kind of walk through that. And then if there's anything a little bit different when you are in transition and you're on a job search and you're seeking the next opportunity, and how that may be a little different. So when you got somebody who's coming to you and they are currently working, but they're wanting to find something new, and then you realize, oh, we need to walk through your values. What is some of the things that you do with them to help them find those out?
I ask a lot of questions. So the first thing I do is I let someone tell me their story, and I sit and I listen, and tell me why you're seeking coaching. And most people will provide an awful lot of information about themselves openly and share with me when I have that first conversation. And the next thing that I would do is we'll look at their current work situation. And I do an exercise that I call the want match exercise. And I learned this from a coach that taught at the Life Coach School. This is the want match exercise. And what you do is you list 10 things you really want about a job that you already have in the current job that you're in. Wow. And that's hard for people, right? Because a lot of people are when they're coming to me as a coach, they are focused on the things they dislike because they want a change. They're at that point. So we look at, what do you have in your current job that you want? And people come up with examples like, well, I work at home and I'm really happy that I get to work at home. Or some people, it's the opposite. I work in the office and I like the office environment. It's a pretty office and I get to be with people. And simple things like they have a good cafeteria, or I get to interact with my bestie at work and that person's really fun to be around. And then we talk a little bit about the work that they do as well. But I try to get them to focus on what they want at work that they already have. And then we can flip the switch and say, okay, what do you want at work that you don't yet have? And that's an easier list for people to come up with most of the time. And it allows someone, when they're looking at a new opportunity, to clearly see what they could potentially be giving up. And and it points to what's valuable to them in that moment, right? And that's when I say values, like there are people that will tell you your core values are part of who you are and they don't change your whole life. I don't subscribe to that. They change based on your situation and what's most important to you in the moment. So that's the want match exercise that I go through with folks if they're currently working.
Yeah, I love that you said that it does change, because it definitely does. When you come out of college, you don't have a family yet, most likely. You may or may not even be, dating someone who eventually is going to be your spouse. You probably are just looking to, move up, work hard. The values of things like flexibility, to be able to do things with kids and all of those things, that's not really there. You don't really need that.
Absolutely.
The fact that you only start with 2 weeks vacation really doesn't mean that much to you, because you're probably not going many places anyway, all of those things. But then they do change. And I'm curious if you found this too. I was having a conversation with my wife a couple months ago. We were driving around, and she just recently changed jobs. And we were discussing kind of the way company culture has evolved even since we got out of college, which was 2008 is when we both graduated. So, just some of the culture changes that have happened. And there's sometimes some companies that, especially if upper management is more from the older culture, the culture that existed in the early 2000s, early, 2010s, those type of things, where the values were a little bit different. And as people that are like my age, which I'm a millennial, so as millennials are getting into things, there seems to be sometimes in some companies, not all, a little bit of a friction of, I grew up with this kind of culture, things are changing, people's values are changing, and sometimes there's a friction there. And I know that can cause a lot of things. But then it feels like it's a pendulum in a lot of ways, where, you had the really tough cultures, shut up and do your job. That's it.
Yeah.
And then it kind of, there's other places where it's like more of a family atmosphere, but it seems like they're always struggling to get anything done because they're too lax and all these things. And so I love that you talk about the fact that they change, and that people's values change, and all that. So I assume the exercise is pretty close when someone is in transition. But I am curious if there's any differences in the process of evaluating values when someone has just recently been let go from a company.
I do take a slightly different approach. We still do the want match exercise, but I start from the perspective of what do you want in a job, rather than what do you want in the job that you had, because we don't want to look back and mourn over the things you no longer have. That can be helpful, and in some situations it's necessary, but as a coach, I'm not the right person to help you through that mourning process. That would be a therapy task. So I start with, what do you want in a job? What do you really hope your next job looks like? And then we also talk about, what do you not want in your next job? Things that maybe you experienced, or you just know are your non-negotiables. And I'll give an example. So when I graduated from college a long time ago, I was given the opportunity to interview for a cigarette company. And I knew that I did not want to work for a cigarette company because, people in my family were sick from cigarettes, and I just didn't want any part of that industry. That for me was a non-negotiable. And so I like to talk to people about what that is for them, because I'm not going to help them pursue a job at a company they would hate working for.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of places out there that just doesn't match up, and that's okay. But just know that it could be a really nice job, but it just doesn't match up with you, and you just have to be willing. One of the things I think we were talking about right before we hit record that I would love for us to explore real quick is, as you start evaluating your values and you get into transition, there is a few ways that someone can look at the transition. One, they could have a mindset of, look at what this company did to me, kind of a victim mentality of, they did this to me, they put me in this terrible spot, now I'm having to go through this, and I'm doing all of these things now because I have to. I'm in a bad spot, I've got to take care of my family, I've got all these things. And there is that, and there's a lot of reality to that mentality. But then there's another way of framing it, which I actually love, and it's of looking at it almost as, I have an opportunity now to explore what is important to me. What do I really want to do in the next phase of my career? What did I, go through those exercises? What did I love? What could I have done better? Putting some ownership on your career and saying, hey, look, I didn't do anything egregious, but I could have been better in this area, and this could have contributed to me not moving up or me not doing this. And then you have an opportunity to improve yourself in the course of this transition. Have you found that there is is there a way that more people tend to look at the transition, or are you trying to help people kind of move into the latter, in my opinion, of, hey, you have an opportunity here. You should really, really think about taking it. Which way have you kind of experienced more?
Yeah, so I think most people are hurt and angry when a layoff happens. It's a natural part of the process. You've lost something, right? And so, in my view, it's both. What I do is I help people to not wallow in the anger for too long, right? But I'm never going to tell someone you're doing it wrong if you're angry. You're doing it wrong if you're disappointed or unhappy. Makes total sense, right? And I help people see the opportunity on the other side. And sometimes just sharing examples of, I know many people who have experienced a layoff or a job loss in their life. And many of those same people have said to me that it's the best thing that has ever happened to them, because it caused them to reevaluate what they were doing and what they wanted to do, and that they came out better on the other side. But when you're in it, that's hard to see. So we help people see, okay, your situation that you're in right at this moment is lousy. What are we going to do in the morning? Right? What can we do tomorrow to see if you can make it through just another day, and to not wallow in being very unhappy and letting that thought spiral happen.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that you said that, because I have found when anyone's come to me, whether fortunately or unfortunately, me myself have been in this situation before. So I do know that there is light at the end of the tunnel, and that you can find something else, and all of that. That doesn't mean that I don't go through the day or so of shock, or, especially if it's sudden and you weren't expecting it. And I have told people, especially guys that have been my friends, I have made sure to tell them, hey, you need to take a second and feel what you're feeling. What I've found is a lot of my guy friends that have gone through it don't take that time. to sit in whatever's happening emotionally to them. They just start going to the next thing, start trying to fix it. That's a guy thing. A lot of times we try to fix things. And unfortunately, what I've found with those guys who have done that is it manifests itself in other ways down the line if they don't deal with that. And they don't sit and they don't say, okay, this sucks. And I'm hurt by this. I'm mad about this, whatever that feeling is, and allow themselves to have that. But you make a very important point of you can't sit in that forever, because that's only going to start deteriorating you as a person.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
One of the things that I think is really interesting in the idea of looking at it as an opportunity is you do have a chance to really evaluate if you're wanting to make a change, a major change. And I was even giving you an example earlier of, I've spent 15 years of my career as a project manager. And I know what my value is in that. And I know where I'm at. I know what I was making. I know where I can get. I know what the floor is to that. I know what more of the opportunity is for that. And I know where I can go. But I also spent a couple years as a marketing director. And I was thrown into the deep end as a marketing director. I was a one-man band. I did everything from creating content to doing social media to SEO to every aspect of the marketing for a company. But on paper, I only have 2 years of experience. So if I was to go that direction, there is a very real acceptance that I would need to have of I'm probably not going to be making what I would make as a project manager. And can you kind of walk me through how you've helped clients who have decided, I don't want to do what I've been doing. I've done it. It's not really something that I care that much about. I want to make a change. How have you helped people walk through those decisions to be able to be ready for that change?
Yeah, for that pivot. And as you touched on a couple of things there that have to be considered when you're trying to make a career pivot. One being the financial aspect of it. And, some career pivots might end up resulting in you earning more. More often than not, you take a lateral move where you're earning the same, or you may be earning less, as in the example that you provided. And the decision really comes down to values again, and how important is that salary to you. So you look at, what are you using that salary for? How is it impacting your life? And are there changes you could make to make the new salary with the job you love work for you? If you have a big house and you need to take a salary cut, are you willing to give up the big house, or do you value that more than you would the new job? So I talked earlier with you about the fact that I have two kind of values exercises I do with folks. And the first being the want match exercise. The second, I learned from my current coach instructor, Trudy LeBron, who is the instructor at the Institute for Equity Centered Coaching. And this values exercise asks you to just take some silent time and really think about what's really important to you today. And there's, you take the time and you make a list of all the things that are really important to you. And then you kind of categorize things and group them together where that makes sense. And then you have to circle your top 3 or 4 of the things that are the most important to you right now. If you're unemployed, money might be at the top. Mm-hmm. If you're employed, money might not be at the top. So it depends on where you are in life, and what's most important to you. So in the case of a career pivot, We would talk about why you want to make the pivot, what's important to you that's causing you to think that you want to pivot, how important is the money, and what would this new job look like for you. Then we look at skills you have and how you would get new skills for the new job if you don't yet have them. Like in the case of the IT person to the ballerina, you got to start at the bottom, right? That's not an easy transition to make. And then we map out a path of how to get from here to there. But I'm never going to try and convince someone who, has a big house and loves it to take a big salary cut if it means giving up the thing that's more important to them. So it's all about what you value in the moment.
You bring up a really good point of, in your example of IT to ballerina, it reminds me of
ridiculous example, by the way.
Well, no, it reminded me of a message that I got probably like the first or second month that I started doing this podcast. And I got it on LinkedIn.
Yep.
And it was a random person out of Florida, I believe it was. And initially, it sounded like they were asking me for someone that they could connect with as like a recruiter or someone down in Florida. And unfortunately, I didn't know anyone in Florida, and I really didn't have an answer for them. And I told them that I would look, and if I, try to ask around and see if I could find some. But then they made a statement to me that has stuck with me for a long time. And it was, I have worked in what they called unskilled labor my whole career, which I hate that term. I've worked in a lot of shops. There's a lot of skill involved in working in a shop. And there's a lot of things that they do very, very, very well that could translate. But in his mind, as he was wanting to transition into something else, more in an office setting or whatever, he just felt stuck that the only skills he had was in a shop setting, or as he called it, unskilled setting. And immediately my mind goes to, well, the beauty of today's day and age is there's so many resources online of learning skills.
It's true.
But if someone came to you in a situation similar to that, and said, I want to make this huge change. I want to go from, we can even use somebody who's been in a shop and they want to get into, say, IT. How have you, what would be kind of the thing that you would help them do to get to a position where they could, start over and probably start at the bottom and work their way up? But what would you kind of help coach them do?
So it in that sort of situation, it often takes multiple steps to get from here to there. And so we would look first at the skills the person has. And I would ask a lot of questions about what their day-to-day looks like. So in the example of the shop worker, is this shop worker somehow aware of and overseeing the safety of other employees? Are they organizing the day in any way? Or are they simply going in and doing one specific task all the time? And those people skills that a lot of shop workers will get just by how they interact with others, how they organize work, what they're given responsibility for doing, translate into transferable skills. So we list what those things are first. And then we look at, okay, where are you now? Where do you want to get to? And maybe we look at LinkedIn to see somebody else who's made a similar transition, and we see what steps did that person go through. And we find that what is one job that gets you that one step closer to where you want to be, that then translates into the next job that gets you even closer to it. And it can take some time to get from here to there. But first, it's identifying what skills you have, what's transferable, where do you want to go, why do you want to go there, what's the reason. If it's just more money, is that truly what's more valuable to you? And then we map out a path to get there. So in the case of the silly example, the IT to ballerina, very likely in the beginning, I would recommend that person keep their IT job and go volunteer at a ballerina school, right? Go help teach some others, or join as a hobby, something like that, so that they're in that environment and gaining more skills.
Have you found that money has been a huge motivation for the people that you've coached? I mean, it's obviously a factor, right? It's you got to live, costs are going up, et cetera,
Absolutely.
et cetera. Like it's obviously a thing. It's not something that you should just discard. But have you found that for a lot of people that is a top motivation, or does that tend to, as they go through these exercises, does that actually tend to go down more than they probably even thought that it would when they started the exercise?
It often goes down further than maybe they thought it would, but it's always there. And the reason that money is important to people is because it allows you to participate in the other things that you value. Right? So if you value a big, beautiful home, you're going to need more money to get that big, beautiful home. If you value a fancy car, there's nothing wrong with that, right? You're just going to need more money to get yourself a really fancy car. And so those are the things you have to consider. And there are jobs that where you can earn a lot of money, but maybe you're doing something you don't enjoy doing. You have to think about those things. And it does tend to fall down the list as we look at, okay, well, why do you want that money? And then people start to really talk about the things that are most important to them.
Right. Yeah. And I love that. I love that is kind of what you've seen, because that's what I was kind of expecting you to say and hoping that you would say. Because I have found that, after a certain, whatever that certain number is, I know I've heard different numbers there. Then a lot of people don't necessarily find that much more happiness in their overall life. And it's been really interesting to have conversations with people where when you really do start to ask them what they value about their job, even if it's super high paying, a lot of times that isn't what they bring up. And I think that's really an interesting thing and is to me encouraging for someone who is wanting to make a big change of, hey, you may have to make a short-term sacrifice. You may have to think about your house. You may have to think about the car you're driving. You may have to find a car that's suitable for this time period and make that difficult decision. And, you may have to eat in more often for a while. And, my wife and I have had to make those decisions of, we don't go out as much, or we don't, whatever. But I think there's always that long term to keep in mind of, you're making this change for a big reason that matters to you, and it's a big value. So as I kind of, as we land this plane, I love to ask this question, and I think you've probably answered a lot of this already, but I love to ask the people that I'm talking to, if say it was me and I came to you tomorrow and I said, I just got let go. I'm scared. I don't know what to do at this point. Maybe I've sent out a ton of resumes and I'm getting nothing back, and I don't know that I really want to go this way. What would be kind of the first piece of advice that you would give someone who is just now starting that journey?
So the first thing I would say to you would be, I'm so sorry that happened to you. And that really sucks. And I'm glad you reached out for help. And maybe give yourself a couple days of grace to just let the news land, right? Because it takes a little bit of time for that to really sink in. And then I would have a conversation and get a lot more context about who that person is, what skills they have, what they love to do. And then we would work towards trying to figure out what kind of job they could go for next. I would also ask financial questions like, where are you at right now? Are you struggling to put food on the table? Or do you have a nest egg you can lean on in the meantime? What's your worst case scenario? And I would refer to services that would help in the case where they're just struggling to put food on the table. And I would not ask that person to pay me as a coach because they just need to eat, right? So I really try and look at that person as an individual and tailor any advice that I would give or questions or recommendations that I would have to their specific situation, specific skills, and what they're telling me in the moment. And it's different for everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that you brought up the human aspect of it.
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest thing that I've been hoping to drive home in all of these conversations is the human aspect of it in all regards, whether it's candidates that are experiencing companies that aren't replying to them or aren't even rejecting them or ghosting them or whatever you hear a lot of, or it's candidates that are applying to jobs and are really frustrated with those companies. And I'm saying, hey, remember, you're dealing with human beings too, especially if it's a small to mid-sized company. You're dealing with potentially a one-man show, one-person show, and they're probably swamped and they're probably trying to do the best they can to get back to each and every one of you, but they just may not be able to, and it may be a little slow or whatever that situation is. And I love that with coaches, with recruiters, all of those things, they realize, hey, we're dealing with people here. It's not just a number, which is how a lot of people probably feel when you get let go, that you were just a number. You weren't valued to anybody, especially if it's your first job, because you always kind of feel like we're family. And that's even said a lot. We're family. And then that family will, kill you just as quick as they hired you. And that's a big thing to wrap your mind around. So I love that you brought that up. But Ellen, I can't thank you enough for coming on here, and I can't thank you enough for being willing to kind of share some of your things that you share with your clients. That's just amazing of you. I can see the heart that you have for all the people that come to you, and I would love for you to let people know how they can find you if they're looking for a coach to help them make that transition, whether they're working or not. And, where can they find you and how can they get a hold of you to hopefully use your services?
Thanks. So people can look me up on LinkedIn. Look for Ellen Lyman. If you're listening to this podcast, they may be already connected to you in some way, and we're a connection, so you can find me through there. And I also have a website. The site is inspiredleader.me. The .com was taken, so I went with .me. It was very affordable, and it was a self-built website. Maybe I could use some marketing assistance to get that thing polished up. But I offer a schedule on the website where you can schedule 45 minutes with me to talk about your career, and that 45 minutes is free.
Nice. Great. Well, like I said, I can't thank you enough. And I hope that at some point our paths cross for, not just digitally. I hope we could have, I'm sure there's far more topics we can talk about in this realm. And I would love to have you back if you were willing to just keep this conversation going, because as much as right now we're dealing with what we're dealing with tough markets, companies being overrun with candidates at the moment,
Yes.
at some point that could flip and things could be different. And, the conversation is a little different for candidates of, what to really value as they maybe get multiple offers. And hopefully they do. And hopefully they have a choice to make and all those things. So thank you and so much. And again, I hope to talk to you again here real soon.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you very much for having me on. This was a lot of fun, and I hope that your listeners get a lot of value out of it.
Thanks.
Awesome.
Well, that'll do it for this episode of the Job Seeker's Journey podcast. Again, I'd like to thank Ellen for coming on. I'd like to thank her for her candor, for her generous heart, and for just now being a good contact and friend to me. Talking to Ellen is one of those things where it encourages me every time I meet someone like her. And the reason for that is she decided that she wanted to help people out of the goodness of her heart. Yes, she has made it a coaching business, but it is out of the generosity of her heart to want to help people find that next opportunity. And I find that amazing. I have long said that the guests that I have been able to bring onto this podcast is by far my favorite part. And Ellen is one of those people that proves that that is indeed my favorite part of this podcast. I'm so grateful for her. And if you are looking for an amazing coach, we are going to have the information for her coaching business in the show notes. And I highly encourage you to look her up, whether you're at a job and you're fed up and you want to find your next opportunity, or you want to know what else is out there, or if you've recently been let go and you are in transition and you're trying to evaluate where you want to go and what direction you want to go in, I highly encourage you to look up Ellen and use her service. As I say every episode, if this is your first time listening, it's an honor for you to hit that play button. If you have listened to multiple episodes, I cannot thank you enough, and I will never be able to thank you enough for continuously hitting the play button every week when this comes out. I will ask it that if you are inclined, please rate and review this podcast, whether you're listening to it on Spotify or any place where a podcast is played, Audible only, or if you're watching this on YouTube, please like, subscribe, make a comment, start a conversation. It is an honor for you to do so. But that'll do it for this episode of the Job Seeker's Journey podcast, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.